Ta vel imot Verdensbankens visepresident, spesialutsending for klimaendringer og nå påtroppende leder i FNs Sustainable Energy for All, Rachel Kyte.
Good afternoon. I'm in transition, just like all of you, towards a world of zero carbon growth. I'm moving from a position in the World Bank Group as the Vice President and Envoy for Climate Change, still in that job for the next few weeks until Paris, and then taking on a new position working with all of you as the CEO of Sustainable Energy for All and the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the UN for Sustainable Energy, a chance to roll our sleeves up together and achieve that sweet spot, or reach that sweet spot where we can extend energy for all, where we can do so in a much cleaner way, and where we can achieve a revolution in efficiency. It's a front-loaded goal. The international community agreed 17 goals in September, but it's impossible to achieve the goals on health, on education, women's equality, if we can't make huge breakthroughs in providing affordable, clean, efficient, reliable power to households, to hospitals, to schools, to small businesses worldwide. But let's just look at this big milestone that we have in just a few weeks in Paris. The first test of the international community after its agreement of the Sustainable Development Goals. If we can agree on a set of universal goals, if we can agree that we are indeed as the Secretary General says, the first generation that actually has a real chance of ending poverty, and at the same time that we are the last generation to have the chance to really grapple with climate change, and that we have enshrined in those goals a commitment that we will leave no one behind, then the first acid test of whether those are just words or whether those really mean something will be in Paris at the climate negotiations. Of course, one of the acid tests is, can we actually put into that document language that affirms the science and affirms that we have a long-term goal of zero carbon growth, of net neutrality. Now, can we achieve that? Well, the negotiators have their work cut out for them. But I think we have to think about Paris as an extraordinary pivot, the moment when we turn collectively to face down this challenge of deep decarbonisation while we grow, while we prosper, while we build prosperity, while we allow people to have an opportunity to imagine that bright, green, clean future that will produce the jobs, that will support the aspiration that we all have, that our children will be well taken care of. Now, in order to shift, in order to pivot, Paris is not really speaking to the people who will be negotiating. Paris has to speak to all of you, has to speak to market participants, has to speak to economic decision makers, has to speak to investors, to consumers, and has to unequivocally communicate that this is the direction of travel and that this is the ambition for how fast and how far we will travel in that direction. So the audience for Paris is very different than that for any other climate negotiation in recent times. And of course, despite all of the other things that are going on in the world, that audience is looking and that audience is waiting to hear what the level of ambition will be. Now, this is a very different proposition, Paris, than any other climate negotiation before, because it is a bottom-up, constructed vision of that ambition. As you know, more than 152 countries now have filed with the United Nations some kind of national plan for how they will achieve low carbon growth and resilient development. They vary in quality, they vary in ambition, but never before have we had collectively the first draft of a global investment prospectus. It will have to be refined. For those countries where the debate is not really enjoined between the private sector and government and civil society and the unions and everybody else about how are we going to fashion this new direction of growth, then that conversation needs to ensue. For those countries that took the opportunity in the last year to begin that conversation, there's some really hard conversations to be had about which policy tools to use, in what order, to achieve what effect, how will decarbonisation be pursued. This has given an extraordinary opportunity for us to really look in the mirror as economic actors and be really clear about the policy options which are available today and which work. As we have been saying in the World Bank Group for some time now, and now we are joined by the IMF, we are joined by the OECD, by the International Energy Agency and others, we have to get our prices right. We have to get finance flowing. We have to send unequivocal signals into the economy about the response that we want from the private sector and from the public sector. So we have an opportunity to set really strong, clear, long-term signals that will allow smart investment decisions to be made that will start to bend the curve of emissions. So let's talk about getting prices right. We have been working with the 40 jurisdictions, countries, subnational jurisdictions, cities in some cases, who have begun to or have been operating a price on carbon, some of them for some time. They may have been doing it through a tax or a fee, they may have been doing it through a market-based mechanism, an emissions trading system, or they may have been doing it through a mixture of all of the above, or they may have been using implicit pricing mechanisms in their macroeconomic policy. I mean, here in Norway, this is not news for you, but this is an emerging trend. We've been supporting them technically, and what's emerged in the last year is a remarkable political coalition of countries that are moving in that direction, wanting to come together to say, it's okay, we've figured out a lot about how to do this, come on, everybody join with us. And last week, on the 20th of October, the Chancellor of Germany, the President of France, the Governor of California, the President of Mexico, the President of Chile, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the President of the Philippines stood up and said, we've done it. We've taken political hits, we've learned a lot, but if you were a head of state and you were going to Paris on the 30th of November and you were going to stand up and be counted as we collectively shift the pathway of growth to one which is eventually zero carbon, then you have to put a price on that which we need less of. This is the first stop. As Christine Lagarde said at the meetings of the IMF in Lima just 2-3 weeks ago, if you haven't put a price on it, go home, put a price on it and come back. Now, the good news is that because 40 countries have already done a lot of the thinking through this, including the remarkable pilots in China, we have a lot of lessons learned. We know a lot about how to make it fair, how to make sure that the poor do not suffer in the transition from a tax base based on income to a tax base based on carbon. Or to the emergence of a trading system. We know about how to make it efficient and effective. After all, we are in the business of emissions reduction. We know a lot about how to make it more transparent, therefore trusted by the public. So these principles have emerged from all of these systems. And the good news is that 80 countries in their national plans have indicated that they will now move forward to price carbon. So 40 already are, 80 now have said that they will, that's another 40. And so the question on the 30th of November is, and where are the rest of you? So this is technical work, it is political work, and it is now the subject of leadership. This is what Paris is about. If we can get the fundamentals right, then it makes it more possible for us to enjoy on a sustained basis, the remarkable innovation and the remarkable opportunity that we're seeing across renewable energy markets, for example, in large parts of the developing world. So, can we do this? We think the answer is yes. We think there is sustained political leadership, we think that there is real leadership possibility, and the technical work is there. Now, I want to disabuse you of perhaps one notion which is particularly held on to dearly in Europe, which is that what I don't see happening is the carbon price fairy coming onto stage and saying, and the price will be X. What we see happening is a globally networked carbon market evolving from all of these different systems. And yes, there will be transaction costs involved in that, and yes, we don't know exactly what that means for leakage and other issues. And we will have to build confidence around carbon assets, and they will have to be able to be traded transparently and reliably in a verified way between different systems. But we're already beginning to see that happen. And just with the Canadian elections last week and the call to arms by the new Canadian Prime Minister to all provinces, that it shouldn't just be British Columbia and Quebec and Ontario and perhaps Alberta that are thinking about pricing, we'll start to see more and more moving in this direction. And so that linkage between California and Quebec, which came voluntarily, that is what we see more and more of. When China becomes a national carbon market in 2017, then the focus of attention will move from Brussels to Beijing quite quickly and will actually add a whole new dynamic, and I would imagine a whole new impetus for many other jurisdictions to move forward with their pricing. One technical point as well is that when we look at those jurisdictions that are moving into pricing, we see them introducing the price at a low level while they get used to administering this new tax or this new fee or this new trading system, while they educate the public and different industry sectors about what this means and how it's going to work, while they learn lessons, and then they are beginning to ratchet up the price. So Chile will come in with a modest price and then we'll raise it. British Columbia came in with 10 Canadian dollars and raised it to 30 just a few years later. We think that that's a reasonable, pragmatic way in which to introduce pricing. Now, the adverse of pricing, of course, is to get rid of all of the silly, inefficient things we do in the economy, and that's why we need real pressure around the removal of subsidies, harmful subsidies, and there's an important role for the G20 to play in Turkey in just 2 to 3 weeks' time. So what I wanted to say to you is that I believe in Paris, despite the problems of the negotiations and the zero-sum game that can sometimes turn into, that we are seeing remarkable political momentum and leadership around the basic tools that we will need to use in order to have the pivot towards low-carbon growth, to have the sustained economic management necessary for all of you to prosper in the entrepreneurship and the business models of that greener, cleaner part of the economy. And all of the evidence is that as jurisdictions put prices in, we see emissions go down, we see efficiency go up, and we see R&D spend in the greener innovation part of the economy go up. And that's true at whatever stage of development the economy that we're talking about is in. So, reason to be faithful and true to that which we know, which is to price the stuff that we want to get out of the economy, and that this is a movement where the business community and government working together, hand in hand, could actually make a substantial shift in the way in which we think about the future. Thank you.